I'm blown away. I'm speechless. I can't even do an intro because we just witnessed the most well-written episode of TV on Disney Plus yet, and it's Andor episode 4. And I would go as far to say, I don't even think it's that much of a stretch, that Andor episode 4 was more well-written than House of the Dragons episode from this last week. We live in a world where a Star Wars episode of TV is more well-written than an episode of TV from the Game of Thrones universe. That's saying something, and it's not an exaggeration at all, because this episode's dialogue was above and beyond anything we've seen in the Star Wars galaxy before. The minute this episode ended, I went back and rewatched some of the big scenes from it, and I haven't done that with Star Wars probably in a very long time. Every scene had tension, purpose, the dialogue flowed so well, exposition was done so naturally, it wasn't forced or anything like that. There were so many amazing one-liners. I'm going to talk through all these points. I'm just going to give you an overview of my thoughts. I mean, of course, again, the realism was front and center with these lived-in worlds, these massive sets, and also shooting on location, especially the Scottish Highlands. That was an incredible sequence, just walking on the side of a mountain. I mean, it just felt grounded and amazing. And the acting, again, is just top of the top tier. Of course, from Diego Luna, Stellan Skarsgård, we're going to expect amazing acting, but seeing these side characters, bringing in Qyburn from Game of Thrones, the maester that brought back Wildfire as the main general in the ISB, in the Imperials, is incredible. He absolutely stole the show. Every scene he was in. The new officer we met, I don't know her name yet, but she is also so great in the subtleties of her performance. This new band of rebels is... You can feel that they're seasoned. You can feel that they've been in this fight a while. You can see how impatient they are, how strung out they are from, as they said, eating roots and foraging for the past couple months just to get to this one point. And you can feel the trust in each other. They've been through the ringer together, and you can feel that just from their performances. I'll get into all these a little bit more, but I mean, across the board, everything hit the highest of notes. Acting, dialogue, production design, direction, cinematography. This episode was something special, and it did it all without any action. I mean, this was drama at its best. This episode just scares me for future Star Wars TV because this is now the gold standard of dialogue, tension, drama, and I really hope that we can reach these heights again. We might even reach them in this show, but I just wanted to absolutely gush about this episode in my intro, and I didn't do an intro, so hello everyone, welcome back to Star Wars Mark of Balance. My name is Mark, and today we are obviously talking about episode 4 of Andor and just how incredible it is. So I'm going to jump into the dialogue because I think the dialogue really drove this entire episode. It was very focused on these intimate scenes of tension and world building, and I really just want to highlight a couple scenes that stuck out to me. I immediately went back and watched them after the episode was over. The first one that comes to mind is Luthen talking to Cassian about joining his little operation and how this unfolds. And obviously Cassian doesn't want to join this. He said, I'm just here because it was my only way out to survive. You could just drop me off at the next point. And Luthen does this great thing of flipping it. He's like, I wrote it down because I don't want to get it wrong. He says, I said, I know you. I know the outside based on what people tell me. The rest, I imagine. I imagine whatever you tell me, you will eventually die fighting these bastards. Wouldn't you rather give it all at once to something real than cut away useless pieces till nothing's left? It's perfect because he's absolutely right. I mean, Cassian will survive, he'll live on, but every step of the way, he'll stumble, he'll lose a piece of himself, and then by the end, he'll just have nothing left, and he'll keep ripping off the Empire, but it'll be for nothing, and he will eventually die to the Empire based on the life he's living. So he's really speaking directly to his heart and saying, hey, you're going to die eventually. You're not going to flip your life around based on this attitude that you have right now. Might as well go all in with me and push yourself forward. Of course, Luthen, we don't know his true motivations at this point because later on we hear that Cassian is disposable. So is he saying this to Cassian out of genuine care that he thinks he will be great, or is he's just an asset to him, which I think I'm leaning more towards the asset portion. Of course, he gives him the Qyburn necklace. He said, this is important to me, but I'm curious what that's going to mean a little bit later on. I think that's planted for a reason. As they said in the plan a little later, the sky will light up with a bunch of kyber crystals that explode from these meteors. So I don't know if this kyber crystal will help in the mission to some degree that only Luthen knows about. I don't know, but it was really great for Luthen to have that conversation again, great dialogue with the new leader of this rebel cell, where he's basically like, that's the great thing about renting him. He's disposable. And Stellan gives a great performance and basically just goes off on her like, hey, you need this. I'm providing this. Get it done, but I don't exist. And then he disappears. And this kind of leads into the ISB meeting, which I was locked in because Qyburn, I don't know his name in this, but Qyburn from Game of Thrones, the maester, the bad maester, basically, he leads this meeting and he has this great speech about, what do we do here? And of course, our new female Imperial officer gives the the LinkedIn profile perfect version of what the ISB does. And he's like, that's great. It's completely wrong. He says, security is an illusion. We are healthcare providers, locating germs inside and outside. The longer we take to diagnose, the worse they get, the longer they fester. And I loved this comparison. I love this idea that security isn't real, because he's right. You could just call in the Imperial Navy. You can send in thousands of stormtroopers and quickly turn things off. But security, if you have an illusion of security over something, you'll never need to use the big stick, the Imperial Navy, the army. So I just love that line. I love his delivery. I mean, there's so much quick, decisive delivery in this show with these really long pieces of monologue that is just delivered so well by these actors. And, of course, most of that is going to the actor, but the way the script is written, it's easy for them to just flow in and out of these long pieces of dialogue. And this was just one of the many times it's happened throughout the show. And Qyburn, he has this speech here, and then he has it later on when he talks to her again. It's just enthralling. I was just locked in every time he started speaking. He's just the perfect epitome of the Imperials, and I love the aesthetic of the Imperials. I don't want to jump to aesthetics already, so I do want to talk about one more piece of dialogue that I absolutely loved. I was so excited about the entire episode. I forgot to mention that Mon Mothma is in this episode. My queen has finally arrived. She did not disappoint. She was fantastic in this episode. I can't wait to see her story unfold, her side of this political spy drama. And I absolutely loved every scene she was in, of course. But the dinner party scene where she's talking to her terrible husband, and I would treat her so much better. I don't know why she's with that bum right now, but never mind. But over the dinner party, I love that she talks to him about the seating arrangement. She says, why are you bringing these people in? Every time I'm in the Senate chamber, they always oppose me. They always stop me from getting these bills passed. And he kind of just rubs it off. He's like, oh, well, maybe that'll come around in the next Senate meeting, and now they know you. Maybe they'll be more inclined to help you out. And she's basically like, what they just did will cut off supply lines to this remote world, and that'll destroy their food stores, and they'll go hungry, and there'll be massive starvation, and a lot of people will die. And she's like, yeah, maybe we'll talk about that. Maybe we can laugh about that over our third course. Making that connection, like, we're going to have 3 courses of food for one night between all these people. And this whole planet is now going to be basically in a state of famine, and all these people won't have any food at all. And we're going to be consuming probably what they might get in a week, and we'll laugh about it. The perfect juxtaposition of saying it out loud in this argument was so well executed, and it just makes it feel so much more real, and that Mon Mothma is in this fight. I absolutely love the dialogue in this show. While I'm talking about Mon Mothma, I do want to jump into this aspect of the early rebellion, which is basically just trust between the different groups. I think it was so smart that they had Mon Mothma and Luthen having this distrusting conversation in his shop, where basically, they take the masks off after they, oh, I'll show you this present, while they think the driver is a spy because he's a new driver and she doesn't know him, they don't know him. So they maneuver the conversation into a back room where they really get into the talks of the rebellion and all these inner dealings. And there's this distrust there where he's like, you can't bring in more people. We can't trust anyone else. We have to worry about feeding people and moving forward with these covert operations. And it's perfect comparison to the on the ground, like the boots on the ground with the people that Cassian's with. I mean, the minute a new person comes in, they're like, how can we trust him? He has our life in his hands. I don't even know him. We've been together for months. This guy's just going to come in, and in 3 days, we're going to have to trust him with our lives. And it was just the perfect reflection that, you know, in the political side and on the boots on the ground side, there's little trust within the rebellion. And that's kind of shown in a lot of the books and kind of that extended universe, kind of saying like, we might all be fighting for the same thing within the rebellion, but at the end of the day, different people have different ways to get there. And you can't really trust many people when you're the underdog and you're the guerrilla warfare. And I just love that it showed both sides of the rebellion there. I mean, of course, we have Saw Gerrera. He'll come in at some point and be that extremist version of the rebellion. We even hear talks here that, you know, if you fall asleep on watch, they'll cut your head off and laugh about it by putting it on a pike. It's really great. I love the different dimensions of the rebellion and that they're showing it from all sides. It's really just like a microcosm of what the rebellion is at this point in the galaxy. Kind of because I talked about Qyburn, I talked about Game of Thrones. I want to mention this other line of dialogue that I loved. It was the new female officer talking to the other officer that's kind of their butting heads together, showing that, you know, internal struggle between Imperial officers, that bureaucracy, all that stuff. But I loved the line of dialogue where he's like, how long have you been here? A year? Maybe over a year? You might want to steady the ladder before you start climbing it. And, you know, it reminded me of Littlefinger's speech about chaos is a ladder. So I just put those two together. But I do like the imagery of that. Like, you want to build yourself up, but you're not even on steady ground yet. And when you fall hard. So it was a cool veiled threat. And it adds so much to her character without her, you know, looking in the mirror and saying, I need to rise up through the Empire. It's showing it through like actions and how other people look at her. Just, you know, kind of doing this exposition a lot more smartly than just having the character say it out loud, but having other characters kind of impart it onto them. So, you know, just another great piece that is reinforced in the next scene where she does meet the general again to talk about this dispute. And he kind of says the same thing. He's like, I know it's difficult for you to rise up in the ranks, unfair as it might be, but we all need to do our part, or whatever he says. But just kind of building up like why she is so ambitious, why she's doing this, why she's going above and beyond. Is it because she is really passionate about this, or is it because she does want to get to that higher spot inside the Empire, which we'll see. But I really loved her character here. I'm very much excited to see where she goes and how Cassian is her next step for her ambitions. So after I've talked about all the amazing dialogue and acting, I do want to jump to the continuation of realism and world building in Andor. I forgot to mention this last week, but these worlds feel like they have history. These towns feel like they've been lived in for centuries or decades. That little conversation with Luthen and that random old man on the sky bus where he basically just comes over onto a seat and says, the transportation to get into the town used to be a lot easier before the Empire. We used to just fly on in, and they would still charge us an arm and a leg, but, you know, it was much easier. And nowadays, you got to give them all this money just to spend more money when you get to the town. And it does seem like a scene where it's just kind of thrown in there, but I think it just serves so much more to how the world has changed around the Empire and how it affects different places. We get more of that here, of course. We see the Alpani, I think that's the new world. We basically see that this is a village type of land where people are farmers and they live off the land, and they've been dispersed now. And we hear about this ancient ritual within this little temple that's been in the middle. We don't know if it's a Jedi temple. We'll see that maybe a little later. But there's this ritual that happens every 5 years, and there used to be this grand festival, and you know, because of the Empire, that doesn't happen anymore. And just making these worlds feel so lived in and have these great long histories. We hear more about it with Luthen when he first has Cassian in his ship, and he talks about this rebellion that happened so many years ago from this other species who was taking over another planet. I don't know much about it, but I read some stuff on Twitter that this was kind of a callback to the Old Republic. But, you know, once again, establishing this great long history in the Star Wars galaxy that I don't think we've seen in Disney Star Wars since ever. I mean, I think history has been kind of pushed to the wayside in favor of more character-driven stuff, which is fine. But I think Clone Wars and, you know, Rebels to some degree, there's this great amount of history that comes with interacting with everyday people on these everyday planets. And I love that it's returned here, and not taking away from animation. I love animation. Animation is a valid form of art. But when this historical stuff is done in live action, it does have a little bit more weight to it than in animation. And that's not because animation isn't valid. It's just that animation is elevating the story because it can be done in a surreal sense. It can be done with visuals that might not be as impactful as live action. On the other hand, where live action excels and increases the impact of the story is because it is real, is that tangible feeling between you and the characters. You see yourself in them just a bit more, just because there is that realism to it and the practical effects of the stage and everything like that. It's a lived-in world. You've seen these locations before. It's kind of in that same breath. So not taking away from animation and the world building that animation has done, I'm just saying in live action, it's elevated that much more. And that's because of the genre. And that's what you got to appreciate, that different forms of art bring new things to the table. So I love that they're leaning in as much as they are with this realism, practical effects, history building, world building. It's fantastic. And I do want to talk about, once again, the sets and the lack of the use of the volume. This show just has a very different sense of scale. Just that one shot, as I mentioned, of the Scottish Highlands, it was just fantastic. And seeing the TIE fighter fly through it just was so much different than maybe what you would see with the volume in The Mandalorian, Boba Fett, Kenobi, all that stuff. The sets on Coruscant, of course, the big over-the-top shots are, CGI. But when you go to those intimate corridors, we see Karn, he's not in this episode a lot, but we see him return to his home on Coruscant, and you see the architecture. It's very oppressive. You see him go down the elevator, and as it's going down, it's a representation of his life. It's basically like he's going to his lowest point. And it's just fantastic. The set with Mon Mothma's house, and then also the ISB kind of meeting room, those colors, they were so different. The ISB meeting room was black and white and dark gray. Mon Mothma's, it was like white, but it was also like cream eggshell and yellow. It was a little bit more elegant. And just those lived-in sets, I just don't think you're getting that same energy from the volume. Even the Rebel cell that Cassian joins, that farmland kind of thing, was very cool, seeing the sheep with the multiple horns, and then just these vast mountains that they're kind of at the base of. It just adds so much to it. I love that the volume exists. I love that the volume is useful in different ways, but I just think that it might have been overused, and I think here you're seeing that feeling of scale and lived-in environments make so much more of a difference to you dropping into the world. And yeah, the set design here just continues to blow me away. And I can't wait to see this get bigger and bigger as the story becomes more wide-reaching, and all of these different pathways and all these different characters start to interact and their storylines start to clash. And it's only just going to be elevated by these practical lived-in sets. So have to, of course, call that out. A final random thought I did want to bring up, because it is so kind of jarring when you first see it, is all the rebels having literal AK-47s. I mean, those are just spray painted black. Like, we know exactly that is a gun from our world. And I don't think it's done out of laziness or lack of creativity. I simply think they did it to draw that connection to our real world experiences of guerrilla warfare. I mean, when I think of AK-47s, I think of the Middle East and that kind of guerrilla war tactics that were used. And I think maybe Vietnam to a point as well. So I think that was an intentional decision to not be like, oh, they're just using AK-47s, where the production design just went down for me. That's so lazy. But I do think it is to elevate that idea of guerrilla warfare cells fighting against the big bad empire, even maybe implying that the United States is that big bad empire, kind of as George Lucas did with the original trilogy in the Vietnam War. So here, kind of bringing that into our world with, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Vietnam again. So I think that was a very intentional decision, and I did want to call it out because I thought it was pretty cool and a lot deeper than maybe a lot of people thought. So as you could tell, episode 4 of Andor is one of my favorite episodes of Star Wars TV ever. I think from a entire package perspective, I think it is the best episode of Star Wars live action TV, from a writing perspective, from a dialogue perspective, from an acting perspective, from a set design, production design, directing, cinematography. I think it just has everything and more. And it did it all without action, which I think can't be understated. It did this, it kept me locked in because of how well all these pieces came together. This is what Star Wars TV can be. And I hope it extends to movies more. I really do. So yeah, we live in a world where a Star Wars TV episode was more well-written than an episode coming from the Game of Thrones universe. And that is just fantastic to say. And I can't wait to hear your guys' thoughts. It's still a slow burn type of show, so I'm curious to see how people are reacting to it within the Star Wars Mark of Balance community. Do you enjoy this? Do you enjoy this change of pace? Do you want to see more action? I'm very curious because I love it so much, and I want to see if other people are reciprocating that. So let me know on my Instagram at @star_wars_Mark of Balance. Interact with my post. DM me. Love talking about Star Wars, obviously. And yeah, look out for my reviews weekly. I'll definitely be doing them because they're giving me reasons to review these episodes, unlike some of the other episodes we've gotten from animation and live action in the past couple shows. So yeah, hope you guys are doing well, and I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, and may the Force be with you.
Peace.